Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always, I am joined with someone who's currently reading what looks like a Sunday Times bestseller.
Yes, I'm reading a very good book right now. Can You Taste the Color Orange by some nitwit called Matthew Reid.
Never heard of it. Never heard of it. Sounds like a bad thing. Sounds like
you should
bad
buy
thing
it.
For dorks.
But yes, hello, I'm Scott.
Yeah. Hello. We didn't have an episode last week. I'll just say off the bat, we did record an episode, but somebody on our team, not naming names, Scott, forgot how to record audio competently, and so the entire episode just had to be scrapped. It was just a nice 3-hour conversation you and I had about Legends of Tomorrow for just you and me. That was how we spent last week.
So to explain what happened, OBS decided to do an update before we started recording, and I just pushed the record button presuming that all the settings would still be in place, but no. Of course not.
There's always an excuse, isn't there? There's always an excuse.
Fingers crossed this one is going well.
This week we are going back to what we were doing before the little break that we had at the end of the month as we continue to dive through the war games. This week we are covering episodes 7 and 8. We will be covering the final part next week, and if you missed any of the previous parts, please feel free to go back and listen to those episodes so you're fully caught up for this one. I was, before we dive into the episode, actually, I had this thought the other day, because, you know, obviously I'm doing the preamble where it's like, you know, listen to the podcast, subscribe, we are audio, blah, blah, blah. There is, I think, several different tiers of, like, Doctor Who fandom, and if you're on the tier where you found yourself listening to our podcast, congratulations, you're the biggest dork. You're like, not only do you like Doctor Who, but you like Doctor Who enough to listen to a podcast with about 60 monthly listeners going into an extremely deep dive into the war games. So congratulations to you. You've fallen down the rabbit hole.
I mean, I feel like with people making the podcast with 60 listeners a month about the war games is bigger dorks.
Sure, but right? I'm just saying, like, if you're listening to this, like, you know, you're a freak. You're a freaky freak.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to gain new subscribers. Just insult anybody who's listening.
Well, they know who they are. They know who they are. They know what they are. You know. But we shall dive into the war games straight away. Let's just do it. Let's jump into episode 7.
Both of you.
So, episode 7 begins, if you forgot, where episode 6 left off, with the Doctor being crushed to death with the companions inside, like, the elevator or whatever the fuck it was, because they're inside, like, a big TARDIS, and they decided to manipulate the size of the room that they were in, and crush them, much like a trash compactor from that episode of Legends of Tomorrow that we're not allowed to talk about.
Fun fact, these are actually called Sid Rats in the script, which is just TARDIS backwards.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's fun. The Doctor, like, climbs out, waving a white flag, being like, please don't crush us to death, and the guy's like, okay, bet, as long as you get all of your companions out, and the Doctor's like, no way, and then he drops a smoke bomb, like he's Batman, and he fixes all the controls on the machine and quickly runs back inside to get away. It's a very silly way of getting away, but I guess the Doctor's Batman now, it's okay.
And also, the Doctor's like, hey, I can't agree to your terms of agreement before, you know, I need to know what's going to happen to my friends if I agree to you, which comes into play in the cliffhanger to episode 8, which is interesting how they tie the arc together.
Sure. Our two bad guys go on to have a little argument, as they are wont to do, where they were like, hey, the fucking war dude, the warlord, he's on his way, and everything's chaos. It's pure chaos and pandemonium. What's wrong with you? And they decide on who's going to go chat with the Warlord. Now, before we get to the reveal of the Warlord, I have to say I had very big expectations for the
Okay.
presentation of the Warlord, because they spent 6 episodes building him up where they're like, yo, you better you're in so much shit if the Warlord gets here. You know, if the Warlord gets here, he's gonna fuck you up. He's gonna mess up your stuff. And then the Warlord arrives and he's like just like a dork. He's like a little fucking dork with big glasses on, you know? Like, he's not like this like intimidating, dominating presence, and there's no like showman. He's just like a guy with glasses. He looks like everybody else. I was very disappointed.
That's what I love about the Warlord, though. He's just a regular dude. He doesn't really shout. He's just talking in like normal human terms, whereas the war chief and the security chief are just like overacting their asses off, and just the Warlord walks in, just a regular dude. I like it.
He's not just a regular dude. He's the goofiest looking man I've ever seen.
I mean, this episode is full of goofy looking people, but we'll get to the Warlord
know, that
when
should
we
tell
get to
you.
him.
That should tell you. The Doctor and Jamie basically are like, let's just fucking skedaddle. Let's just run away. When the Warlord, they just decide to run away, isn't it? Processing,
Yeah.
we'll run away. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
they
the
sit
Warlord
around
shows up.
eating some apples.
Yeah. And then the Warlord shows up, and he's just a fucking guy, and he gets... Oh, sorry, my fucking iPlayer just closed everything down.
Nice. So the Warlord here is played by Philip Madoc, and he had only appeared in the show a few months earlier as Maloney's in the director's previous episode, The Crotons. Madoc grew a rough beard and wore the pebble glasses to hide the fact that he was just recently on the show like a few weeks ago. So, yeah, your favorite glasses. But we have previously seen this actor before. He was in the second Peter Cushing movie, The Dalek Invasion of Earth, 2150. He was the guy who backstabs the Doctor and Susan and gets murdered by the Daleks. If you remember, there's a whole arc where this guy comes out of the bushes and tries to lead the Doctor and Susan to a shed, and he leaves the shed at one point and he takes the Doctor with him, and oh my god, there's the Daleks here. The Daleks are surrounding this shed, and it's a moment
Okay, yeah.
where
I remember. Yeah, that's ringing a bell. I couldn't place any faces, so like it's just like a blank. I do remember that scene happening, but I don't remember any actors involved.
And the guy apologizes to him, and the Doctor's being the nicest person ever. He's like, "Oh no, I expected this to happen," you know. and then there's a moment where he's just standing there in silence. He's like, "Yeah, well, I've done my job. You'll leave me alone now. I'm happy to go." And then the Daleks just stand there in silence, and he's like, "Oh shit, they're gonna murder me."
Yeah,
and then he runs back. He runs back into the shed, and the shed explodes. It's my favorite part of that movie. It's excellent. And he's also in a million other episodes. He is, of course, in The Brain of Morbius as Salon, the creator of Morbius. And he's in The Power of Krull as Fenner, and he's just a really good Doctor Who villain who pops up every now and again. I think he's like the only... He's probably played the most villains in terms of like people who can actually see their faces. I know like Nicholas Briggs does a lot of voices, but Philip Madoc probably has like the most villain roles where you can actually see his face, which is interesting.
Yeah. But he gets caught up on everything going on with the Doctor running around and escaping, and they're like, oh, but don't worry, we'll get him soon. He's like, where is he? He's like, the Roman zone. And then we just get a replay of, is it the cliffhanger to episode 1?
Yeah.
Or episode, where it's, you watch the Romans come charging, and then the Doctor and that are like, oh my god, there's Romans charging at us, and then they just turn and run away. And it's certainly a scene that happens in the episode.
Yeah, they use the exact same footage of the Romans, which makes a lot of sense. You don't want to just recast. You don't want to bring back these actors again for just a quick 20-second scene. That would be ridiculous. But yeah, it is obvious that they are reusing the same scene if you do watch it in like a binge format. Whereas, it's been like 6 weeks for little kids in the 1960s. They probably wouldn't
It's like
notice.
a year. It's like a year, yeah. But we then go back to the war chief and the security chief.
Yeah.
Is who they are. See, I'm remembering names,
Yeah.
and they continue to bicker back and forth. That's basically them. This whole episode is just them being like, "You're wrong. Oh no, you're wrong." Blah, 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 blah.
This scene was actually added into the episode because the episode was running under time. And the episode is still the shortest of all the episodes of this story at 22 and a half minutes. So they are really spinning their wheels here.
They have a nice shot. Again, the cinematography in this story has been a highlight the entire time. Was this bickering back and forth is happening, and then it gets cut off by the warlord, and it gets cut off by just a rapid zoom into his face.
Yeah.
Although what I was kind of disappointed at is his performance when it zooms in on his face, and he's like, "That's enough." He doesn't sound angry. Like, he doesn't have like a commanding voice where he's like, "Shut the fuck up, both of you." He's just kind of like, "Okay, guys, come on, knock it off."
I kind of love the contrast. The war chief and the security chief are like overacting their asses off. They are shouting every 10 seconds. You can tell when these guys are angry. But there's something that's so villainous about the fact that this warlord hardly ever shouts. He just uses a calm voice. There's something so threatening about that, I feel like.
Sure. I guess you could infer it that way, but I don't read that from his performance at all. I feel no intimidation from his performance, even from his like calm sort of demeanor, because it falls flat for me. I don't get that interpretation. I mean, I can see how you could see it that way, but it doesn't work that way for me.
It feels like the warlord doesn't have a weakness in the same sense that the security chief and the war chief do, because
to me it doesn't feel like he has a presence.
If you well, that's fair. You can have your own opinion, but you're wrong. But if you piss off the war chief, he will tell you that he's pissed off. He will. You can poke at him and you find his weaknesses and find what he's lying about and all that. Whereas the warlord is just talking at the same tone. It's hard to gauge what his plan is, what he's up to, that kind of thing. I think he's great.
He's just a regular schmuck. He's just a regular Joe. We get some really cool special effects where the Doctor and Jamie and that come running out of thin air. How did they manage that? Incredible. But it does continue into a very nice shot. Again, the cinematography in this scene, in this series story, words being fantastic, where when they appear on that hill, the camera then zooms out to reveal like the bunch of guys down below them. Just some a lot of zooms. I like a zoom. We're going in and out of things, But basically, they get called off or they don't get called off, but we cut to the commander guy from some of the previous episodes, and he's like, shoot them with the machine gun. And then it's the least, I was about to say it's the least accurate machine gun fire I've seen all day, but that's not true, because I was watching the Fallout TV show this morning, and there's a scene with a machine gun turret, and it fires like 1 million shots, and none of them hit. And I was like, Jesus Christ.
But yeah, great comeback for General Smythe, who's been gone since episode 4, I want to say. He does the classic spin around on his chair to reveal who he is, which I think is great.
Yeah, and it leads to a very awkward action scene, but ends up connecting Zoe back with the Doctor when a bunch of the guys that she's with come and take out those machine gun boys, with some phenomenal choreography as always.
They're carrying guns, and I guess they don't want to use the guns as actual guns. They just hit the guy on the back of the neck, and of course this is Doctor Who, so he's either dead or just knocked unconscious.
He's definitely dead. He's that's a killer move there. A light tap on the back of the neck. Are you joking? There's no recovery for that.
I would love to see a body count or a montage of all the times in Doctor Who where somebody got
Someone
knocked
gets
back
hit in the back.
Yeah, and just like a tally of either this is a knockout or this is death, you know. Like I just wonder how many times that has happened, how many times people have died.
It's a few millimeters, you know. It's a few inches between like that's death, that's knockout. So like it's so easy to mess up.
But yeah, obviously they're just trying to avoid violence at all costs because, of course, parents would complain. But it does
we
get.
just had a machine gun firing at them.
Yeah, but there's no violence involved there because they missed, you know.
Yeah, there's nothing violent about a machine gun. Come on.
No.
So the episode continues on with Smythe having captured the Doctor and Jamie and that, and he's like, you know, we're gonna fuck you up, we're gonna arrest you and get the game over. And the guy's like, you can't do that because we'll turn your soldiers against you. Look, don't you realize that Smythe's not even a human being? He's not even a real general. And Smythe's like, haha, joke's on you. You forgot about my hypnotism glasses that I use every 5 seconds. And he hypnotizes some more cards to get the guys dragged out of the building. And it's a lovely repeat of everything that Smythe's character is. It's nice that he was gone for so long, and then he comes back and he checks all the boxes of everything he's done before, you know.
Oh, I mean, it's a nice little reminder if you haven't started watching the serial yet. You know, this is episode 7. There's a lot to catch people up on if they're just brand new to the story, you know.
Yeah, but I feel like every episode of classic Doctor Who stories are catching people up on what happened in the last episode, and what happened in the last episode was fucking nothing.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it was 20% of something and 80% of recapping what happened last week. Yeah, we're just basically back full circle. The Doctor is about to be executed again. And all this execution talk, you would expect... I wonder if people were thinking that the Doctor was actually going to be executed, and this is how John Pertwee would enter the show. Like, it's such an interesting misdirect that there's so much talk about the Doctor being murdered here.
There is a lot, and this is like the 8th time that he's been lined up for execution in this story. It does happen frequently. And the rest of this story as well, or the rest of this episode, I should say, not the story, is just this action scene of them trying to escape Smythe's area. Like, you know, they've got like that brief part with the Warlord where he's like, fuck you guys, I'm in charge. But the rest of the episode really is just the Doctor trying to escape being shot again, which is every episode of this story is that.
There is a missed opportunity here because General Smythe does tell the war chief that the Doctor was murdered, and I think there's a good potential to further the story where the Doctor has to kind of work in the background where everybody presumes he's dead, but he's just working in the background trying to save the day and shit like that. Like, we do nothing with this idea that everyone thinks the Doctor is dead. There's something in here that could last an episode or 2, you know?
Yeah, but unfortunately, there is not. And to be fair, I'm okay with that. We don't need more storylines happening in this. I
think we do need more storylines.
No, I think
because...
we need more filler. I want more filler. Twice the episodes, half the plot, please. But Smythe, we get a really cool shot at some point, looking through the bottom of one of the maps, looking up at the war chief, and we get another shot later on where the Warlord comes over and puts his hand on top of the camera. Where the map was, and it's a really cool idea for a shot, but then it leads to like the wide shot looking at him and he's standing in the most awkward half lean on the table to try and justify that shot. But there's a lot
happening, but nothing happening at the same time.
It's just a lot of action. It's just a lot of action scenes happening.
There's a moment where Smythe asks Jamie and Carstairs, "Hey, yo, where's the TARDIS? We kind of need the TARDIS here because we are just going to go back to it, aren't you?" And then they're like, "Yeah, only the Doctor knows where it is, and he's about to be shot." And you can hear Patrick Troughton's voice giving the orders to execute the Doctor, and I'm not sure if this is supposed to be a ruse where the second Doctor is actually pretending that he's being shot here, or if it's just they couldn't hire another actor and they just decided to use Patrick Troughton's cartoonish voice. I don't know.
It's really strange because it's not really communicated either way on what they're actually trying. Like, is it a joke? Is he messing with the guy, or is it just a character that happens to sound a lot like Patrick Troughton? They never really go into it, and it's such a weird little oddity in the episode for sure.
And then Patrick Troughton and all the soldiers just run into the chateau anyway, so that's like 5 minutes, but just accounted to nothing.
I mean, it continues to account for nothing. There's a bit of an action sequence, and then they basically take over the chateau, where the guy is like, "Please send help, I'm going to die, please send help." And the guy's like, "Make sure you unplug the fucking thing, make sure you unplug that thing."
No, firstly he's like, "Oh, did you find the fucking TARDIS yet?" And it's like, it's been fucking 1 minute since you told me.
Can I kill the Doctor first?
And this is, of course, where we find out, the Doctor is still alive because they shoot General Smythe dead, and the camera is still on as we enter the room, and my ad block has been updated. I don't know why that popped up on my screen. But yeah, they basically see the Doctor. So this whole potential story arc of, the Doctor's dead, just accounted to nothing. Like, what's the point of General Smythe telling the war chief the Doctor's dead when he's not dead? Oh well.
The fun, but they basically decide, like, what's the best way that we're going to take back the chateau, and the security chief is like, "We need to send in the guards or the army or whatever." And the war chief is like, "You're dumb. That's a dumb thing. We need to blow up the entire building." And then the warlord is like, "Actually, I'll have you know that you're both dumb. And blowing up the building would destroy all the technology inside and ruin the barriers, and sending in the guards are like completely useless or whatever. So let's just do a full frontal assault. Let's just straight up attack these guys and see what happens." And it turns out that it goes pretty well, because when they attack the guys, everybody forgets what strategy is, and they kill a couple dudes, and then the Doctor decides to run into the gunfire in front of the bad guys to try and grab the brainwashing thing that they had, and it was like, what the fuck was the point in any of that? Like, it's just some weird blocking. There's a lot of weird blocking in this episode. We should also say that they interrogate a Frenchman, or they don't interrogate a Frenchman, but they clear a Frenchman's brain from the brainwashing that happened mere moments before, and the Doctor doesn't speak a word of French in this episode. There's no translation, so they have to rely on one guy who can half speak French, but not very well. And it's whatever. It's just a little scene.
It's interesting. I guess it's because also the TARDIS always translates French for him, so he doesn't need to learn French. But also the Doctor's like 450 years old at this point, at least.
Yeah, and also like he knows English. Like, he learned English fluently, we can't also learn French and German, like, these are 3 languages that share a lot.
like the Doctor has plenty of time. You'd think you'd have to learn a foreign language just in case he goes on an adventure and the translation circuit goes on the blink.
But he's so lucky that the entire galaxy speaks English. The whole universe, everybody knows English. It's a universal language, so he gets pretty lucky there.
I should mention this French guy is actually Peter Craze, who is brother of Michael Craze, who played Ben in the Hartnell era and the beginning of the Troughton era. So this is Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines working with her former co-star's brother here, so that's nice. And there's one thing on the DVD info text that points out that the colors of his suits are like so strikingly different that seeing all these people in color together uniting would be like a strong moment because, this is so many different kind of people surrounding and working for the same goal. But you don't kind of get in black and white because all the suits just look the same color of gray. So if they do the colorized version, this scene would be interesting. The scene would be interesting to see in color for sure.
Yeah, although I kind of hope that they just make it all green. That'd be really funny.
The Doctor and Zoe kind of create like a mist around the chateau to. Obviously, this is them trying to separate the chateau from all the zones. So, this is why we're safe to be here for now.
For like 5 seconds before they get attacked. Because then they get attacked and all that stumbling happens that I was talking about. The Doctor gets captured and really awkwardly dragged back into one of the evil TARDISes, and then everybody runs into an empty room where it was, and they're like, "Fuck, you got away. We all. Oh well." That's a dramatic. And then the credits just roll. It just ends.
A dramatic cliffhanger with everyone standing in an empty room. It's pretty great.
It is pretty superb. But that is all of episode 7. And I think the best way to summarize episode 7 is honestly the description for this episode on iPlayer, which is the Doctor, Jamie, and Carstairs have escaped back to the 1917 war zone, but General Smythe is waiting for them and opens fire with a machine gun. That's basically everything. That summarizes the whole episode pretty sufficiently.
You can really condense this episode into like 4 minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah.
Nothing happens. Like the Doctor escapes from the war chief and all that. They wind up back in the 1917 zone. They get shot at, and then they kill again. Smythe. And then they create a force field, and then they get captured again.
Honestly, you don't even need this episode at all.
No.
Like, the Doctor just gets captured after coming out of the lift, and then the War Lord shows up. Because you could just get rid of Smythe, and nobody's going to question it, because it was 6 weeks ago.
What the writers did do, they wrote the first 6 episodes, and then they wrote episode 10, as a final point, and we're like, okay, now we need to do 7, 8, 9 to try and lead up to episode 10. They've really tried to treat this as a 6-parter, really, and then these 3 episodes here.
That's such a weird way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare doing 10 episodes. I'm sorry. It's this is a 4-hour story. This is insane.
It is, and it's it feels like we've been doing this story for a lifetime. this covering 10 parts is a lot of parts.
Oh yeah, it will be shocking when we do. I think we're doing a Sarah and Jane Adventures episode after this, and it's going to be shocking seeing. Oh my god, you can fit a story into 45 minutes. Holy shit.
Yeah, whereas we go through 45 minutes on these 2 episodes, and it's like, oh, nice, he left the room. He went into a new room. That's cool. And that's the whole 45 minutes.
Oh, dear. I'm excited for this one, Phil. This one's probably my least favorite of the 2. So.
Oh, good, yeah. So let's jump straight in to episode 8 of the War Games. 8 begins with a recap, basically, of what happens at the end of episode 7.
Before we go in, I have to say something about this episode. This is
you hate it.
This is one of the lowest viewed episodes of all time, with 3.5 million viewers. It is the third lowest rated episodes, just behind Legends of a Sea Devil at number 2 with 3.47 million viewers, and Battlefield Part 1 with 3.1 million viewers. And of course, there is multiple reasons for this. The Saturday night schedule on BBC One were declining as a whole around this time, mainly because ITV kept on airing shows like Land of the Giants or Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. They would try their best to schedule some of the biggest American hits against Doctor Who. In the 70s, they had the A-Team, but Doctor Who would always end up climbing back up after a few episodes of one of our nearest shows, so the ITV competition was never anything to worry about. But also, it's episode 8 of this story. People were probably getting sick of it, I'd imagine. And also, it's the summer. It's the middle of June. It's probably a nice day outside. Kids are playing in the playgrounds and whatever. Like, there's a lot of reasons why this episode is one of the lowest rated of all time. But yeah,
it's pretty impressive. I like for like Legends of the Sea Devils, you know, like 3 million whatever. It's pretty bad, but it's not unusual for modern TV to get ratings about that number. Like, that's still a pretty solid number for modern ratings. 3 million in the 60s?
Yeah.
Nobody was watching, man. Nobody watched that shit.
And yeah, the BBC weren't too concerned about it because at the end of like the William Hartnell era, the ratings were also getting very low, and then they started rising with when Patrick Troughton first started. So yeah, they just pictured the same thing would happen with when John Pertwee would enter the show. But yeah, with 3 channels and not much other means of entertainment, 3.5 million is very low. It is insanely low.
7th of June, I will tell you that in 1969, specifically in London Heathrow, because that's the only information I could find with a quick Google, it had a high of 22 degrees that day and a low of 6. So it was a pretty nice day. It was a pretty nice day. It's a bit warm. It's not. It's probably a bit too hot for my taste, but it's not like overly hot. But it was a very nice day apparently. So,
yeah, that's way too hot for my taste. I can't stand anything above
it
15.
It got 27 degrees was the hottest that happened in June that month, and then in July 31.8.
Jesus Christ.
Toasty.
But yeah, people were probably getting sick of this after 2 solid months of watching this story.
Well,
unfold.
we've only been covering it for like a month, and I'm already sick of it. Yeah.
It is a lot. Like, I'm surprised we didn't. Like, we could have done like a 2-parter inside of a TARDIS, limited sets, limited actors, just a bottle episode like The Edge of Destruction. You know, like just a bottle episode rather than pulling out a 10-part story. That's insane.
I am really looking forward to the rumored colorization because it's going to make this story a lot more watchable. Because right now, it's like you just skip to the end. Honestly, skip to the end. You don't need to watch. You don't need to watch this. Just watch the last episode.
Yes, a nice 90-minute runtime would be so much more palatable.
I'll take 20. I'll take a 20. 20 minutes could be.
We're nearly there.
This episode opens up, and there's basically like 3 different things going on at the same time. So I'm just going to talk about each like whole scene rather than cutting back and forth, because I think that's probably going to be easier because not much is happening in any of them. So the first sort of scene stuff that we get with Zoe and the rest of the survivors, when they set up a machine gun to try and defend their base, and they go on to talk about how there's like other resistance leaders or something that they need to meet up with. And the one thing that I really will get into, I'm sure later on in the episode, when the Mexican man shows up and how definitely aged like a fine wine that character has. But what I really like, and this is another goddamn example, Zoe is a fantastic companion. For a female companion in the 60s in Doctor Who, she has so much agency. Like, she's been kind of in the backseat. She has been in the backseat since about episode 2. But in those first few episodes, you know, she was taking charge. She was giving ideas. She was, like, you know, not just standing there screaming. And here she is in this episode. They would be fucked if she wasn't there to be like, oh, by the way, I know about this guy, and this guy, and I know exactly where they are. Like, she's saving everyone's ass. Great companion. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, and also in the last episode, she helps the Doctor come up with the force field around the chateau. I do wish she had a stronger moment of, oh no, Doctor, you're doing this wrong. This goes here. I wish there was that kind of moment to make what she was doing stronger. But yeah, she
Yeah.
does help the Doctor. That is important to note. And in Tales of a TARDIS, it's revealed that she became president of Earth in the future, in
Nice.
the very distant year of 2000, I guess, or whenever she's
Wow.
from.
Imagine living then. Crazy.
And of course, she gets her memory erased at the end of the story. Spoilers alert. And she names her son James after Jamie subconsciously, which is really sweet.
Oh,
And of course, you noted that Jamie is kind of sexist. It turns out that he went off and had like 10 grandchildren that were women, so that's kind of cool.
and he hated every single one of them. But they go off. There's like a little action scene kerfuffle with a TARDIS that shows up, and it's really badly done. But eventually they go off to go and try and find the other guys, and they leave Jamie in charge of the place, and he's got like a smug fucking look on his face when they do that. The other story that we've got is the Doctor's interrogation that is happening. Here with the war guys. What's the name of these guys? Is there like a term for these war dudes?
They were all supposed to be called warlords early on in the script, but then it was decided that only the top of the chain would be called the warlord. I don't think they came up with a second term.
The
for these guys.
warlings. The warlings. Warlings was a cool name.
The gamers. Because there is the sequel to this story where it's a similar premise, and they're called the players. So maybe these guys are called the gamers, which I kind of like.
Yeah.
But yeah, it turns out
MLG
that
Pro.
hypnosis on the Doctor here is useless because it's like Time Lords
He's
can
just sleeping.
resist. They
He's
don't
just
care.
having a nap. He's just like, fucking, I don't give a shit. Let this be over. And it goes on for ages where he's just getting yelled at, where he's like, I know you're a Time Lord, and I know you're working with the Magni Blaze. And the Doctor's like, I don't give a shit. I'm just gonna sit here quietly.
If this was a late William Hartnell episode, he'd be sleeping the entire fucking
snoring.
time.
You'd be hearing snoring. But like, Patrick Troughton does spend the first 10 minutes of this episode with his eyes closed, not saying anything. It's pretty spectacular. But eventually he gets interrupted and taken away. And the Doctor gets left alone with the war chief, and they have a little discussion, both being Time Lords, where the war chief is like, I fucking know who you are, Doctor, even though you changed your face. Which, of course, they were referring to Hartnell at the time, but let's pretend that they're not, and this guy was in the division. And he knows about the fugitive Doctor. And he's like, I know what you were doing. I know why you ran away, Doctor. And I was similar. That's why I was also in the division, I guess. Because we're all in the... And I left as well.
Please don't.
And the Doctor's like, it's pretty obvious why you left. You're just a fucking warmongering, power-seeking freak. And the war chief is like, oh, no, you're totally wrong. I'm all about peace and love. And then they like make out a bunch.
Yeah, so the whole premise of their plan here is they're basically pinning these people against each other, these humans, because people of Earth have the most wars, I guess. They're always at war against each other.
Sure.
And their idea is, we're going to get the strongest of the strongest to build an army so that we can go around the world and bring peace. Except, of course, billions of people that you will murder in these war games. But let's forget about that. We're only about peace.
There'll be peace once those guys will go away. You know, once we get rid of all the people that disagree with us, there'll be peace. So we'll just get on with it, okay? We'll never have a war again after this one. It's the war to end all wars. This is the last war. Promise.
But it is insane that this is episode like 250, and this is only the second time the Doctor is faced off against someone of his own species.
And this is the first time where they actually say what they are, rather than just being like, "Oh, you're like me," wink, wink, wink.
It's interesting
it's
stuff.
Fun. I think I prefer, as a character, the time meddling monk. I think he was more interesting. And gave a more varied performance. This guy feels like the Master Light, and he kind of looks like the Master Light as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna do research on what his story is, because there's been a million explanations of what he is. I'll explain it all next week, because but one of the theories in one of the books is that the Doctor, the War Chief, and the Master were like school friends as kids. And he's like the third wheel of this relationship.
Yeah, of course. They all need to be in a gang. There's no way that they were just strangers from the same planet. They knew each other. Gallifrey's really small.
Yeah, I guess it is. You know, everyone knows each other. It's a small city.
Everybody knows everybody. Yeah, everybody knows everybody. But that is basically us caught up on the episode, Scott.
Yeah, but that fucking scene where they're trying to kill the guards that fall out of the TARDIS is fucking ridiculous. We haven't really talked about that.
Yeah, I kind of skipped over it because it's really bad. Because
there's a moment where I think his name is Russell. He's like, okay, when they come out of the TARDIS, you fire.
Fire. When you see them, shoot your gun. And then they come out the TARDIS and they're like, wait, what do we do again? And then they just get shot. They're the most useless fucking guards possible.
And also, why would you set up your little firing range right in the room where we're coming? Like, do it outside, have the upper hand, you know? Have them come out of the door. But whatever.
Or like you've got like grenades and stuff, and just set up like a little booby trap. So they come in, oh, that's a grenade, bang. You know? Oh,
yeah.
Just died. Sad. So, the episode continues on with basically two plot lines moving forwards in this thing. The first plot line being the Mexican man, and the other plot line being the stuff with the Doctor. So let's talk about the Mexican man stuff first. So he's like straight up character from like Red Dead Redemption or something, you know, something that's making fun or poking light at like old westerns and the stereotype characters that are in it. You know, like this guy is full on stereotypical Mexican down to the sombrero, and you know, it's real bad. It's real bad, and I don't know how you cut really around him in the colorization, because he's like featured quite heavily in this second half of this episode, so you're gonna have to keep him in it, surely.
But yeah, he enters the room by knocking out one of the guards, which wakes up one of the other guards, and he's like, "Oh, that guard just." He's like, "There's
nothing
to worry about." Like you hear a noise. Why is everybody asleep? First of all, like somebody should be awake.
It's nighttime. No.
Yeah, but somebody should stay awake.
But you'll be sleepy then. But then they'll all be sleepy.
Wait, I do like the opening of this scene where Jamie kind of tucks Zoe in like a little sister. I do like that. It's cute.
I also like how they highlight the Mexican man's sexism but like they highlight it in a way that's like this guy's an asshole for how like him being sexist is not a positive trait, it is a negative trait, and the fact that Zoe has to get Jamie and then tell Jamie everything he has to say because Zoe knows what's going on and Jamie doesn't, just so that this guy would listen, I think is kind of fun and highlighting how fucking awful this dude is.
He also says she has a big mouth for such a small lady, which is
terrible. But again, it's another scene with Zoe showing agency and smarts, you know, like what's the easiest way for you to deal with this sexist fucking asshole that you need to work with? Like, are you just going to stand there and argue with him when he's already dismissed you based entirely on your sex? Or are you just going to go be like, okay, I'll just get Jamie and he can just echo what I'm saying because that's the easiest. It's the path of least resistance, you know, and there's bigger things going on now.
It does plant the seeds, but she does become a politician after this. You know, she does become president of Earth, which I would personally vote for her. Yeah, she would be perfect, honestly. Like, she's smart, she's reasonable, she's not transphobic or anything that we know of, but she should be.
I'd need to see her policy before I would vote for her. But that storyline, I'll just stay with the Resistance for now before we go to the Doctor, because honestly nothing really happens in the Doctor's plotline other than join the dark side, Doctor. You will rule side by sides, father and son. But the stuff with the Resistance, they go and they basically gather up other Resistance members once they figure out how to work together, and they're like, okay, we've got to go to this place and get the Resistance there, and then we watch them do that, and we've got to go to this place and get the Resistance there, and then we watch them do that, and then we've got to go to this place.
One of the things that Zoe tells Jamie to say to this Mexican man is, unity is strength, you know? That's the whole point of this part of the episode, and you can tell that Malcolm Hulk, the famous communist, wrote this part of the episode, because it is certainly. Hulk was very proud of his messaging here. He was very happy with how he got in, which is fair enough.
Sure. I don't know if you needed to get the Mexican stereotype, I think, kind of overshadows any other message that you might have had.
You know, compared to like anything else from the 19s, there's probably worse. There's got to be worse from the 1960s. This is still around the time where BBC would often air the minstrel show on Saturday night, you know? So it's quite common for 1960s television, I'm afraid.
It is, and it's gross. It's pretty fucking gross, and they should be feeling ashamed of themselves for being so close-minded and so dumb. If you were born in 1969, guess what? You're dumb. You're a dumb Dumbo. You're so dumb.
Well, my mum was born in 1968, so I guess she's not dumb.
She's okay. Yeah, that's okay. Just 69. 69, you're a big flat dummy.
Yeah.
But this continues on with them gathering up recruits until they get a message from the Doctor. So the stuff with the Doctor is it's like spread really fucking far out throughout the episode. Like, you hardly see him in this episode at all, and the stuff that is in it is really not plot driven. Besides, I guess, the tiny little bit of lore you get with the Time Lord guy, where he's like, I'm working with these guys so that I can be in charge, and I'm going to shape the galaxy and form an empire and be the coolest dude around. And it's like, bro, you have a time machine. Why is this the easiest way? Why don't you just go back to the start of the universe or the start of the galaxy and be like, hey, I am in charge. I'm the guy in charge now.
You can go back to every fucking planet at the birth of our civilization
and be like, I'm the king. Make me king.
Build a religion around yourself and all that kind of shit. That sounds so much easier, and there's so much less threat. You know, like, you don't have to work with these other aliens.
That sounds like it could be a really good episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Where, like, Space Jesus is real, but he's, like, a Time Lord who's traveled back in time to make people worship him. You know, and it's like how do you defeat that? Yeah.
Like the Doctor arrives on Earth one day. Like, it could be a season-long arc. Like, you could have one episode. You can have episode 1 set on Earth. And somebody briefly mentions that, I follow this religion, this war chief religion.
Yeah.
And the Doctor's
like, heard of Space Jesus?
And the Doctor's like, oh, you're fucking crazy. What the fuck are you talking about? And then he goes into another planet on episode 2. And the same thing happens. Another character follows the same religion. He's like, hold on, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. Or he sees like a similar sort of like religious iconography that is like, it's like slightly different, but you're like, hey, that looks similar to the one I saw before. What the fuck is happening? It's like this big overarching thing, yeah.
We should be showrunners. That sounds like a good idea.
But he basically tells the Doctor that he would love the Doctor to team up with him, and they could be like Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker, and when they take control, they'll be able to overthrow everybody. And
they actually do use a Star Wars reference here, you know? It is kind of funny.
It's impossible.
Like, George Lucas does pop up next week. Oh, wait, George Lucas was last week.
Yeah.
In our famous episode.
clearly George Lucas watched the War Games before writing Star Wars, because this plot is straight out of Star Wars.
I mean,
or
this
rather,
episode,
Star Wars took its plot from this.
This episode did come out 2 years after he met John Barrowman and quit film college.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen Legends of Tomorrow, and you can't prove that I have.
We need to do it again. We need to record it again. If you missed it, obviously you missed last week's episode. Matthew proclaimed in that episode that he really wanted to do a spin-off show, Who Watches the Arrowverse, where he goes through all 699 episodes of the Arrowverse in weekly order. That's like 11, 12 years. That's gotta be a good job for you.
But we had the reason we were celebrating and doing Legends of Tomorrow was for April Fools. So I've got some bad news for you.
Oh no, I'm the fool.
But the Doctor, they basically, the big bad guys, the big warlords and the war chiefs and the security chiefs, they all have a discussion where they're like, should we just nuke the bad guys? Should we just drop a big nuclear bomb on them and blow them all to smithereens? And the guy's like, maybe, but probably not. We'll just manipulate the Doctor into getting him to just bring them to us. Come here.
Like, they shouldn't even just drop the nuke. They should fucking murder anyone when they have the fucking chance, instead of running into a room, only taking the Doctor and then running back out. Like that could have been a perfect opportunity to murder anyone.
They run back out, and then they're like, okay, Doctor, now you tell everybody to come to us. And then he does that, and then they're like, haha, got you. And that's literally how this episode ends.
Yeah,
it's really
yeah.
Bad.
I do like it that it is kind of tying back to what happened at the start of episode 7, when the Doctor's like, I can't agree to let all my friends come out here and face you guys until I know exactly what's going on. And here he does it anyway, because he's in big trouble. This original cliffhanger would have had the Doctor smiling at the end, which I prefer the Doctor's worried expression as a cliffhanger, because you really believe that shit's going to go down here. I'm looking forward to next week.
I think it's really interesting that these are probably some of the weakest cliffhangers we've ever had. These cliffhangers suck.
To be fair, coming up with 9 cliffhangers sounds like a nightmare.
Just have the Doctor jump over a bridge every now and then and be like, oh my god.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
But yeah, that is episode 8 of the War Games, an episode where fucking nothing happens.
Nope.
Absolute garbage. But we shall be concluding our look into the War Games next week. We're finally here. We're finally in the goddamn end game. We have finally made it. Everybody fucking sing hurrah. As we approach the end of the War Games next week. I'm very much looking forward to that. After that, we will be looking at a Sarah Jane Adventures episode before covering the news at the start of May with a Season 14 preview. Holy shit, the next stuff we're covering is going to be Season 14. Season 1. Sorry, I'm covering the notes. I'm on the notes that you wrote, and you wrote Season 14, so that's your fault. But until then, you could subscribe to us at Who Watches Who on YouTube, where you can see our faces every single week, most of the times, unless we mess up the recording and cancel the episode. We're also available in audio form everywhere you get podcasts: Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. There's a bunch of links in the description. Use at your own discretion. You can follow my gaming channel, Psychedelic Gaming Hobos. I also have a book. I wrote a book called Can You Taste the Color Orange? Scott's got a copy right there. Wow, look at that. That's just the best looking book I've ever seen in my life. You should buy that if you like real better sci-fi than this episode. I can guarantee you that it's better than this episode, particularly of the War Games. Until then,
you do need a bit more Mexican stereotypes, but
that's true. I'm gonna incorporate that into the next one, I think. But until then, we will see you next week when we finish off the War Games. Bye.
Bye.